A warm welcome to everyone to this special podcast episode. Today, my co host Andres Chassi is not here with us, so it will just be the two of us, myself and Laurent Sipos, who is the head of Soma CRM. But now they have a fantastic new initiative, a project called Ethical Intelligence or a new civilizational DNA, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this. Essentially, it's an ethical code that could be considered the equivalent of an ethical AI. And it's definitely worth listening to the whole podcast because this is not just an ordinary project. A lot of people around the world have taken notice of this initiative, and now, for the first time, you get to hear about it here. So, a very warm welcome to you, dear Soma, and please tell us briefly what you do and how you came up with the whole idea that we should be dealing with artificial intelligence and its ethical aspects as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Soma Sipos Torrenvölg, founder of Soma CRM. We deal with the implementation and development of CRM systems. Basically, CRM is about managing a company's relationships, so to speak, and that's what you can do with it. So the point is, with this CRM, we can manage clients, leads, business opportunities, contacts, and reports, and that's basically what I do. The idea came up that there are already plenty of CRMs in the world. There are a lot of them, but there isn't a system that could manage the entire planet globally, or so to speak, the relationships of the whole planet. So I thought this would be really great. There would be a system called Global Relationship Management, GRM. So we have such a system, a GRM, and that's what we're developing now. But I was thinking how great it would be if it were perfect everywhere. And what I've noticed, what I've observed in the world, is that we're basically in an ethical and moral crisis. So we definitely need a code of ethics for how humans and artificial intelligence should operate. And I believe in that. And that this is how we could make the world better if there were a global civilizational operating system that essentially manages the quality of relationships and helps us make good decisions.
So, if I understand correctly, this whole thing started from the CRM system and now it deals with global ethics. But how does this connect with AI? In healthcare, in this healing, helping sector, and more people are using AI. It's becoming increasingly widespread. So, why do you think ethics has such particular significance here?
Well, let's simply clarify what ethical intelligence actually is. Ethical intelligence is the ability to perceive the impact of our intentions and decisions on others and the world, and then to act in a way that creates harmony, trust, and responsibility. So essentially, you could also say that ethical intelligence, much like physical intelligence or cognitive intelligence, serves to strengthen and fortify the mind, right? Well, ethical intelligence at its core essentially works to keep the soul, as well as our relationships with others, in a state of balance and harmony. So that is really what it is all about. And from this foundation, healing naturally arises. If a person is ethical, then everything is in proper order within their soul. They experience a profound sense of well being. And from that point onward, good health and overall wellness are also much more likely to follow as a result.
Is it really that simple that if we are ethically sound, it also means we are healthy? Or are there other factors involved as well? What do you think about this?
Well, there are other factors too, because, it also depends on what kind of environment someone is in. So it's very important for a person to be ethical to begin with, especially in relation to themselves. What I mean is they should really know who they are. They should have a certain vision, a mission, and it's also very important that they keep their life in order as a whole so they take care of themselves. And it's also important in terms of ethics that they have the right knowledge for their life so that whatever they do every day, they can do it with the highest level of expertise. It's great if all of this is in place, but it's also important what kind of environment the person is in, because if they're not in the right environment or if they're not in an environment at all, which is supportive and where the environment really says, go ahead, learn, we'll help you with your mission, then things can get a bit more complicated. However, with ethical intelligence, you can basically create an individual's ethical map. We can create it and see, we can show how conscious they are, how much dignity they still have in relation to themselves, or whether they basically, how much they are truly alive in quotes, how much they are living their own life. So that's how you should imagine it. That's the short version.
And where can this be used? So, what's your idea in companies, corporations, or even in software or for individuals? Or does this code have multiple levels? How do you envision this? Well,
To begin with, this all started from me and the EI ethical code. We actually call the whole thing that, as it contains, for example, 12 basic principles, and the easiest, simplest thing would be if every artificial intelligence used this code, and that would already be a huge help for everyone. For instance, let me give you an example. One of our most important principles is the no principle, the primacy of truth. How great would it be if artificial intelligence didn't hallucinate, but really prioritized the truth? It would write those, or if we asked it something it truly doesn't know, it would say, well, dear Andy, I don't know this. I don't have enough data. But as we know, nowadays it works in such a way that no matter what we ask, it basically has an answer for everything. And that's the worst, when it hallucinates. So I think that in artificial intelligence, complete health would be the truth, because then we would have a really good world. Or if this were to be implemented, for example, in social media as well, so that only the truth would be there too. So the problem in our world right now is that we don't know what the truth is. We don't know what is an opinion. We don't know what is a thesis and what are just thoughts. I looked into it, and on Facebook, for example, only about 10 to 15% is actually the truth. The rest are just thoughts, theses, opinions, and so on. This is what should be sorted out first. And then this would continue throughout all areas in science, within companies, and so on. And this is very important, so that we really don't hallucinate, meaning not just humanity shouldn't hallucinate, but not even artificial intelligence, so that no one hallucinates. And we truly live in a world based on data.
how can this be achieved? So, in your opinion, how can we make sure that, for example, AI, especially in a healthcare context where this is quite crucial, when I ask it something, it doesn't ghost me, it doesn't hallucinate, it doesn't throw random data together that has no relevance at all. For example, one aromatherapist, a really excellent aromatherapist who truly works in this field 24/7, asked the AI which aromatherapy products are good for this or that, and it listed an aromatherapy product that is actually specifically contraindicated. And of course, since she is ethical and kind, so she immediately corrected the AI and taught it that this is not right. But of course, if a non-professional reads this, there can be serious health risks. So how could we get the AI developers or programmers to ensure that the system never gives out such information? Well,
Basically, that's how it can be done. And in fact, such a process has already started. You see, I posted on X that which contains the first ethical intelligence and a code. And well, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence, Grok, automatically responded to this, requesting the code. So I sent them the first point, so to speak, the first fundamental principle, the primacy of truth. They also added it and wrote back that, unfortunately, there are still issues with this. So, first of all, every responsible party should incorporate this primacy of truth into the system to such an extent that it really shouldn't hallucinate, and the systems need to be prepared for this. We've assessed, for example, that ChatGPT can interpret what is true and what is not true in about 70% of cases. So there are already problems with interpretation itself, not just with knowing or not knowing, but they can't even fully interpret the concept of truth. Grok is somewhat better. It can interpret what is true in about 75% of cases. The primacy of truth, so it can't even fully interpret the text of the code itself. So this is something we need to get past, and we need to teach them, make them learn this. And it's already very good if they know what the primacy of truth is. But then at the company level, organizational level, and leadership level, people also need to be taught this, because we are the data source. So if a person uploads half truths or manipulated data as truth into the AI, then the second artificial intelligence, then we're right back where we started. So it's very important that we as people also need to learn, not just artificial intelligence needs to learn. So this would be a shared learning process and a shared journey. And I really believe it would be a great help for civilizations and for humanity as a whole.
that's quite something that Zilon Bas showed interest in this. What direction do you see? Do you want to spread this globally or just here in Hungary? What does the trajectory look like? And who are the people currently working on this? Are you doing it alone or do you have some kind of team for it?
Right now, I'm actually working on this whole project alone. Of course, I have a team for the CRM system, but the core and the code of the whole thing, I consulted with philosophers about that, so that's one thing. Also, it's not really open to the public yet. Only one of the basic principles is out there for now. We have, so to speak, only published the principle of the primacy of truth, because for now it will still be protected under a trademark. So we are arranging the trust, registering it, and from then on the work will fully begin. However, I am already issuing ethical expert opinions and we are preparing studies. For example, we recently prepared an ethical expert opinion for Mission 2050, where the ecological it examines the economic cluster, so we have already deployed it for problems at the level of polycrisis as well. There are already such simulations and tests, and of course, it needs to be validated both with the scientific community and with experts to ensure that, first, it fully stands up to scrutiny, and second, that it can truly be disseminated globally, because the goal is for it to function worldwide. And right now, I am working on this. And now, since there are already a few colleagues who have applied and would very much like to join and work with us, we are making good progress on this path.
And what is the technical side of this? So, should this AI be introduced to developers or to everyone globally so that everyone does everything they can, for example, to teach the AI the right answers, to act ethically? So, where could this issue best be addressed so that AI tools provide normal, truthful answers?
Well, on one hand, it's up to the AI developers to further improve artificial intelligence so that it truly knows what is true and what is not. And at the same time, people also have to learn. It's a kind of mutual learning. That's why I also call it, or I and the code of artificial intelligence, because this is a shared journey. And so everyone has to be taught, everyone has to learn almost globally on this planet so that it can really work well. Because this is the key, this is the gateway, so to speak, toward ethical intelligence. So this is just the first step. And beyond this, there are 11 more fundamental principles, and from there, the possibilities can grow almost exponentially. There are many different possibilities to consider. So, this is, at its core, fundamentally a completely new world, one that is full of potential, and it could really help with so many things, ranging from advances in medicine to the prevention and reduction of organized crime in so many different areas of society, because the system is able to measure and analyze things like intention resonance, or for example, the rate at which conflict is generated, or even how much a person tends to regress, as well as how stable they are over time. So, it can measure aspects or phenomena that, in fact, even the CIA might even be happy about. The fundamental thesis and most basic law of this, which is also our guiding principle, is the primacy of the truth I know.
And how do you envision this? How do you carry out this project? Is this a mission for you, a mission that you undertake voluntarily like this in your free time outside of your working hours? Or is this a professional mission? Meaning, is this a corporate mission for you? Well,
This basically started as a personal mission because I thought that I would offer this global relationship management to the UN or the WHO, which is fundamentally a very good idea. And I am in contact with and a member as a company, namely ALX Innova, as a version center. And I have already submitted two projects there, and investors are also interested in this from the start, which is why I prepared the 67-page ethical expert opinion from Hungary for the investors. And now we are at the point with the investors that they are requesting a letter of intent from 10 to 15 nonprofit organizations or world organizations that would fundamentally support making the planet ethical for the sake of justice, and so that there will never be war, or so that there will be peace on this planet. So this basically started as a small project just by myself, but now I am receiving more and more offers. Recently, I was contacted by people from Ternopil inviting me to Poland out of curiosity. And then within a few months, I will also be going to Spain, if I'm not mistaken, next month in October. So I am being invited to more and more international places. And they are genuinely curious about the whole thing because I can provide reports, I can present data, I have things that are still subjective today, and I can make subjective things objective. And this is exactly what's interesting in relation to human health as well, that with this system, I can detect a person's ethical state, and essentially I can display, for example, an individual's level of consciousness on a radar chart, or how brave they are, or how good they feel in their own body.
And let's not forget that we also invited you, right, to the second marketing day, which will be on Sunday, November 23rd, 2025. And their visitors will also be able to learn what this whole thing is about. But what really caught my attention is whether this is a system, a measuring device, or what exactly is it. So I feel like this is much more complex. It's not just a codex, a written document, but if I understand correctly, there's also some kind of toolkit connected to it.
Yes, there is a toolkit that comes with it, basically a decision support system that also makes recommendations. So it's not just about saying, well, dear patient or interested person, this is where you stand now, and this is your current state. But fundamentally, it also highlights your strengths and the positives. And it also gives a recommendation on what they should do or what steps they should take to feel better. We don't provide a complete educational program because I believe that's someone else's job, but let me give you an example. If it turns out that the person's knowledge level is not very high compared to themselves, it would be really good if they improved it, because if they don't, then soon, maybe in 5 or 10 years, they will have problems like forgetting things or not remembering anything at all, or as we know now, Bruce Willis has a serious health issue, so he doesn't even know who he is or which planet he's on. This happened from an ethical standpoint because fundamentally he didn't study, he didn't teach himself, he wasn't curious about anything, so to speak. He just did his job as an actor, and the connection to himself and self development was left out, and that's a very serious problem. So we always have to keep learning, because if we don't, just like with companies, as they say, statistics either go up or down. So if we train ourselves, our knowledge increases and we feel better and better. But if we don't learn anything, then a kind of ethical decline starts to happen. What's interesting about this is that if this decline goes on for several years, then all sorts of external physical manifestations will start to appear, so to speak. These physiological manifestations, so to speak, after a while.
Well, yes, people often say that dementia is also related to this learning thing, but actually, when I look at my acquaintances, I've noticed that I had acquaintances who were 80 or 90 years old, whose bodies were in really bad shape, but day and night they were working on all sorts of essays and projects, processing newspaper articles, exploring topics. So, Jacobinus, for example, always came up with something new for himself, and then he would focus on that. And his mind, his intellect really stayed sharp right up until the very last moments of his life. So I'm sure there's a significant connection here, whether someone is curious, whether they engage with things or not, because I believe what you use stays intact.
Yes, yes, that's a good thought, and it actually touches on the heart of something, the fractal analysis. So imagine it like this. There are many different levels. Let me quickly explain this, just so our dear listeners can get a sense that we're talking about a completely new dimension here, and things grow exponentially. Right now, we're talking about basic everyday ethics, but then there's quantum ethics, which is almost like a first level science in itself. There we discuss what level collective ethics is at and how it works. And here we already take into account the ethical level of others and how it affects us. And we don't just take into account the ethical level of artificial intelligence or humans, but of all living things. So from this point on, the animal and plant kingdoms are also included, and it's about their relationship and harmony, and a kind of network of intentions. And then beyond this, there is also a kind of cosmic ethics, which basically deals with cosmic level ethics, because from this point it steps beyond even the planets. So it's about how the cosmic level is interconnected and how celestial bodies live in harmony with each other, so to speak. So there are many levels to this. And then there's one you mentioned, which would basically be fractal ethics when we talk about layers. So there's the individual, first of all, that I feel good, I learn, I do my everyday things, just as you mentioned with your dear acquaintance, but it's not certain that they're in sync with their body. So it could be that their body already has certain problems, deficiencies, etc. This is what fractal ethics deals with. And then there's the next level as well, the family, the company, and other layers, how these are in sync with each other. which also matters because as individuals, we might be doing great, but it could be that even the family is really great and very good, but the first major fracture, for example, happens at the group level. So it could be that I don't feel so good in the company. There's not that kind of harmony there yet. And this is something it also deals with. For example, the ethical professional protection related to Hungary that we prepared monitors this on a societal, individual, national, and even global level. And this is where polycrisis comes into play precisely because the mission by 2050, many climate researchers and research institutes dealing with such social problems are saying that the situation is not simple now because we are in a polycrisis. And this system, this is why I think it's the world's first civilizational operating system, can also handle polycrisis, precisely because of these reasons. It operates on a completely different scale than everyday systems, because current systems are mostly linear systems, but the human mind and the way people think thinks linearly. This, however, is a completely and multiply exponential system.
Maybe we should approach this a bit more from a practical perspective. So, for example, if you were the decision maker and you had the power to influence companies so that they only apply ethics, how would you approach the question? Or to simplify things just a bit further, how would it actually be possible in this particular form to reach out to every AI company and have a discussion with them about what could potentially be changed or improved in the program so that only real, authentic data is used? Or, for example, to make it so that you can't ask the AI something that could possibly harm another person, individual, or group, or that could be harmful to society, so that it can't give such answers? Or how could this work in practice to bring the practical side of this a bit closer to the listeners? Well,
It would work like this. Once the patent is in place, they would get in touch with all the developers and then we would send them a description. For example, those who know the truth and the principle of health is fundamentally completely open. So, how could we ensure that people really write and speak the truth? That is something humanity itself needs to learn. Also, what's very important and interesting here is that it's crucial for this to be validated. And that's why we essentially invited the contributions of philosophers and experts and their help, and this as well, that we will validate it. We want to establish an ethical protection council for this purpose, which will be completely independent from us. And in this way, we can have it validated by other organizations as well. I also think globally that it shouldn't be us who decide what is true, what is good, or what the right ethical foundation is, but rather we should imagine a team made up of experts, maybe philosophers or experts from certain religions or similar specialists who fundamentally deal with ethics. So imagine it like this. Let me give you an example. There would be a team of about 15 to 20 experts who would actually review and validate whether this code can be universal, because it's very important that we have to talk about a universal code here. It's not about compliance just in Hungary, but not in the neighboring country, or that the code only fits the Western world. It has to be globally applicable. And I think, for example, that telling the truth, personal, I think this can be expected from everyone on the planet. Or, for example, I also believe it's reasonable to expect from everyone that life comes first. So every human life, every plant, and every animal life is very important, and that comes first. This cannot be overridden by material or any other considerations. So these 12 basic principles are essentially collected together as I see it, but of course experts as well, because good experts will review this and it will be validated, but this is fundamental. It's universal, but it's very important that it has to work in such a way, a specialist said, that it can be accepted globally, that it needs to have multiple pillars, and an organizational system must be developed where auditing is truly effective and where integrity or manipulation is completely excluded. This is what we need to be able to get universally accepted, both in the eastern and western parts, or between the south and the north, and this is the only way it will be able to work.
well, yes, and in health marketing and health advertising, there are already such regulations, at least in Hungary, but also globally, that, for example, you can't mislead consumers. You can't claim that something will cure you if there is no scientific research to support that. So there is already an ethical aspect to this, and it's very positive that you are promoting this kind of ethics, because after all, this is the foundation of human trust, so that I can trust an advertisement or anything else. But still, we often experience that marketing and advertising are not about ethics, but about selling as much as possible, right? For example, in America, tobacco products were first advertised as having healing properties and that they were very beneficial for your health. Tobacco products were promoted this way for a long time until someone discovered that they actually cause lung cancer, which is completely fatal. And it was the same, and you can debate this with Coca-Cola as well. That too at first, well, I don't want to mention company names, but anyway, some kind of cola, since there are other companies as well, was presented as a healing product. In fact, at first you could only get it at the pharmacy. And now it turns out that in the quantities recommended by advertising professionals, it's basically equivalent to diabetes. So where is the line when I can say to say whether an advertisement is ethical or not? Because obviously they want to make a living, support their family, and so on. When they're selling a laundry detergent that contains a lot of skin irritants, for example, and which you could actually make at home for pennies in a non-irritating version, even from chestnuts or whatever. But of course, not everyone is going to start boiling chestnuts just to have their own detergent. So where is the line here and where is the truth? Because I think this is a sensitive issue. How do you deal with this?
This can be solved by understanding that this system is an engineering system, so it's not about saying whether something is ethical or not, or oh dear, what's going on. But here there are concrete numbers. For example, it displays the ethical index. Out of 100 points, it scores 76 and is green, so this ad gets a green rating. That's the level of detail it provides. It says the ethical index is around 65, so it's starting to turn yellow, which means it requires a bit more attention because you can't be sure that everything there is true. And if, for example, the ethical index is orange-yellow, then you have to be a bit cautious. You really need to look into it because it's probably not entirely accurate. There's more falsehood than truth, and things start to get a bit distorted. And if, for example, it turns out that the ethical index is only 28, then that's already in the red zone. So that's a ban. It's not ethical at all. So we can calculate these numbers and display them. And we can also show what the risk is, what the ethical risk is for, say, this advertisement, and what its ethical risk level is. And we can also demonstrate that. For example, we can calculate what kind of intention resonance there is. So what kind of intention is behind it, whether there is responsibility and a good pure intention behind it or a distorted intention. We can also detect things like the rate at which it generates conflict, whether it inherently creates conflict or brings conflict into the mind or the individual who is watching the advertisement. So imagine watching an ad, and by conflict, I mean that the person feels, is this true? Is it not true? What's going on here when they see it? The viewer ends up in conflict themselves. For example, a negative news story or a piece of news that people don't like to hear often inherently creates conflict, both within the person and in general. And then there's the question of ethical coherence, whether the whole thing is truly mission driven, which is interesting, or if it's just about making money, as one might say. So when ethical coherence is very low, it's just about taking something away from the competition, that the only thing that matters is what benefit it brings right now. But if you think in terms of a mission, if you feel that this goal truly has a serious mission, like becoming healthier, becoming better, and so on, then from that point on, the level of ethical coherence becomes very high. Imagine, Andy, what couldn't be measured in society until now, we have managed to make measurable. And I have this saying, what can be measured can be managed. What we can't measure is basically unmanageable, because you might say, well, that advertisement is really good, I like it. Someone else might say, well, this one was really awful, terrible, just bad. So who is right now? But if we say, for example, that this advertisement, I don't know, has an ethics index of 65, that means there was some truth in it because of this and that, so that's okay. But at the same time, there were also some injustices in it, which basically means I wouldn't necessarily give it a full green light, so to speak.
Well, this whole measurability thing is really, really exciting. And yes, there are manipulations techniques, as we know in advertising. There are plenty of psychological manipulation techniques, from creating urgency to buy one more and you get the second one free, even though you don't actually need it, and so on, including the use of colors. For example, it's been shown that 30% more people click on an orange button, etc., etc. So to receive, it's worth dealing with these things. These techniques that, for example, encourage sales are what we call funnel marketing solutions, or increasing the conversion rate. In other words, when 10 people visit a website, will one of them make a purchase or 9? That makes a huge difference. So where is the line where something is considered a great conversion boosting tool, or a subtle manipulation technique, for example, on a one purchase page, or, for instance, a single transaction page? Well,
That's a very good question. Now, if I want to answer scientifically, the line is drawn where the ethical index basically falls below 50%, so to speak, scientifically speaking. However, what you said is very interesting, because what is the difference, for example, between an ethical website and an unethical website? We've actually conducted such tests, monitored websites, and ran these kinds of ethical assessments. And unethical websites, or those where unethical marketing or PR is happening, they command you by now immediately, right away. You have 2 minutes, etc. I don't know if you've ever seen a website where, when you go to the site, you want to go to a, let's say, buy a ticket for a concert, and then you can't really look around properly. You can't browse in peace. You can't even properly check the information, because the site starts stressing you out. By now, you have 10 minutes left or whatever, by 2 now, because wow, 20 people are looking at the site, and wow, you're the whatever. The last spot is about to be taken, and you don't even know if it's true. So now, if it says on the site that there's only one left, well, that's it, and you have to buy it quickly. These commanding and stressful sites, that's how I can. So you're not even focusing on which concert you're going to and when, but just that you have to buy something now. About ethical websites, so to speak, my point and my information is that they basically invite you in, you start reading, and the site just draws you in. I don't know if you know that feeling when a site is really good. Wow, it's awesome. It can do this, it can do that. Wow, it's so cool. So when you have that feeling that it's really great, you feel the energy, the good intentions all around. And then it's not even a question of whether you'll buy something, but rather what else you'll buy and how you'll incorporate it into your life and how much better your life will be. And then, wow, it's going to be great. And people get this feeling. And then the dear interested person goes to bed and can't sleep all night because they're so excited. I've been there too. When I wanted to buy my first smartwatch, after I ordered it, I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep all night. I was already sleeping with the smartwatch in my mind. This was X years ago, and this is the feeling you need to be able to convey. So this is my message to all marketers and PR people. Really, we should build websites like this so that the customer or the interested person truly feels like it's a mission to buy that device, that thing. And when they go to bed, the reason they can't sleep is because they can't wait to unpack it and for it to arrive. So I think these are ethical marketing tools and ethical PR tools.
yeah. Well, yes, the basic principle here is, of course, creating an ethical product. So when I think in the long term, I'm providing value. If I think in the short term, then I don't even know I'm giving something for which I'm taking money from someone, or because of someone. So basically, the latter is what I consider unethical. The former, when I want to provide value so that it's good for them. And for this, since an exchange of value is necessary and we have costs, of course, I asked for money. So this is somehow a more ethical approach. But yes, as you said, there's a scale and this can be scaled. So thank you very much for being here and sharing all this. Unfortunately, our time is up, and this is a really, really interesting topic. So, for anyone who truly and would like to discuss this with you in more detail, since you will also be exhibitors at the second Health Marketing Day, there will be an opportunity for all-day consultations. So I warmly welcome everyone, and thank you very much for being here with us.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.